Growth Pains.
Hey everyone, welcome to this new episode of Growth Pains. Today, my guest and I will be talking about topics such as overreacting too quickly to problems, putting work over personal life, dealing with cancer at critical times for your business, building the right team, and finding focus when you're trying to grow multiple products at the same time. My guest is Patrick Campbell. He has a background in econometrics and math, working as an intelligent analyst for the United States. The way he put it, hunting bad guys with data models, and then move over to Google to start hunting money with data models, which I thought it was an interesting thing. And then he's the founder and CEO of ProfitWell, which now has about 20 to 25% of the entire subscription market in their data. And he puts a lot of high quality content that's really smart out there. So my goal today is to make him seem a little bit less smart so we can all feel better about ourselves. So welcome, Patrick. How are you today?
I'm doing well. So yeah, based on that introduction, it's going to be a really light day, a light topic day here for this podcast.
No. We're gonna keep it mellow. Don't worry about it, right? But just to
Let's do it.
break the ice, what I tried to do initially is I tried to do like a little bit of a true or false. Some of these are meant to make you uncomfortable or to contradict yourself later on, but let me see how well I can achieve that.
Let's do it.
Let's go with the first one. So most people embrace a data-driven mindset when they agree with what the data shows them, but when the opposite happens, they start questioning it. True or false?
100% true. It's the backfire effect. So that's exactly true.
Okay. We'll touch upon that one later. On the last two, I have a couple of like topics that I feel like that. Most marketers that claim to be data-driven do not really understand the fundamentals of statistics that well. True or false?
100% true. 100% true.
Have you come across some atrocities on that one? Because I'm one of those, right? I know some basic math. I did engineering in college, but it's never been like my natural thing. Like I can pass the test, right? If I study, but it's not the way I'm wired.
No, that's okay. But to me, it's more, how do I put it? It's more of, you don't need a background in statistics to be successful by any means. And you don't need to know the fundamentals, but you have to know the most basics and the limits of your understanding or the limits of your data. And what I find is a lot of people, and I just find this because I deal in a lot of data and our products are data products, is that a lot of people, like, to give you an example, our pricing product is very, very data driven. We collect a bunch of data around pricing for brands, and then we present those to brands and give recommendations, right? Well, a lot of times people will ask, well, what's the sample size on that? What's the N on that? And that's a really good indication of someone who doesn't understand statistical significance. Not because it's a bad question, but because really statistical significance is measured. It's a measure of variance, right? It's a measure of the greater picture. And so you'll have people where you'll say, oh, the sample size is 230. And they'll say, well, is that really enough? Is that not enough? And then like you try to explain this to them and they're like, well, no, I think 300 better, right? And there's no basis for that, right? And that's not everyone, but I also think the other thing to kind of not go too far on here is, because I know we have lots to talk about, is a lot of marketers, they think they should be data-driven. And I don't think you should be data-driven. I think you should be data-informed. Because data is never perfect. You're never going to have enough data. There's going to be some really strong data sometimes and some really weak data other times. And it's your job as a marketer to take all of those inputs and then make a decision. So yeah, that's my little soapbox on that true or false.
Love that one. This one is one that I'm really curious to see what your thought is. Quantitative data is more powerful than qualitative data when it comes to decision making.
I'm probably gonna have to say false. You didn't say always.
No.
Maybe you did. I did. Yeah. I don't think that's always the case. I think that there's just some things in marketing, growth, etc., that you have to make longer term decisions on it, and you don't have enough data on those longer term decisions, or there's just more nebulous things. Like, I don't think you should ever choose your branding based on data, like in terms of your brand assets. Maybe your brand voice and stuff like that, you'll collect data, but your color, logo and stuff, I think that's a little less data, a little more qualitative.
All right. And the last two I actually stole from one of your talks, but I just want the audience to listen to them because it's going to make my argument later. Founders with hobbies who score high on work-life balance have slower growing companies. True or false?
Yeah, so that is true. It is not the whole story, though. I get people going back to the backfire effect that you mentioned in the first one. We just saw this in the data, and it's a pretty strong correlation. We tested for dual variables. We did a bunch of different things. And we just found that people who are kind of all in or don't have big hobbies, and hobbies are not, I got a lot of crap for this when I posted it on social. It's not a child.
You're going to get some crap about it from me right now. Yeah, that's why I put them in here.
I know, that's great. No, but like it's in the data. Now, what I meant though is it's not the full story.
Yeah.
We didn't measure, are they happier? We didn't measure, are they more fulfilled? We didn't measure, do they have higher divorce rates? We didn't test anything like that. We just looked at the two variables. And so while it may be true, growth isn't necessarily everything, and I know we're on a Growth Pains podcast, so that should hopefully fit in.
And the last one, it's about remote work. So remote companies also have considerably worse growth and retention than co-located ones. Is that true or false?
This is also true based on the data. And this is also one where, so you're kind of going through what I do in some talks where I ask people to react to things. And, some of the first things are really easy to react positively to because you agree with them. And then this one, there's a lot of religious remote people out there. But again, this isn't the full story. It doesn't say, it doesn't say happiness. It doesn't look at, the ability to hire. It doesn't look at these types of things. And, in defense of the data, this basically becomes non-existent once you reach 80 million in annual revenue. This difference between remote and co-located. Not a lot of 80 million plus remote companies, but every company's kind of remote at that point, multi-office, these types of things. But it is under 10 million in revenue, first getting started in those first years. It is a 20% drop for those remote companies, at least right now. And I have theories as to why that is, but that's what the data says.
Nah, the reason I added those last two from your talk is because essentially those trigger that effect on me right away, right? I'm like a massive advocate of work-life balance, be happy, remote work, fantastic. Everybody should be remote. And then these ones right away are like, oh, he must not be using the right data here. Like there must be something off.
Yeah.
Right. So those triggers.
Some data, and then other.
I just don't like what it says. I just don't like what it says. Right. This one, I was like, what the fuck is Patrick talking about on this one? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. So that's why I wanted to add them. So also the first question I ask a lot of people in this podcast is, I want to start by something that you believe that you are really, really bad at when it comes to work. What is like one thing that you could pick up that that you think you suck at, essentially?
Oh my word. So many things. It's hard to pick one. And it's also, what's really funny about a question like this is that as a founder, or I would argue as like just a driven person in general, it's hard to kind of keep in mind these things because you either mitigate them by like hiring someone else to do it or not doing those tasks anymore, or you work on them and then forget that you're bad at them. And or we're bad at them. And so I think that right now, something I'm really bad at, the latest one, but I've actually solved it in the past month and a half, was I was for years, way too in the weeds and way too in the critical path of a lot of teams. And this was a function of being a bootstrap company. This was a function of me not trusting and not hiring the right people in certain roles. This was a function of a bunch of different things, all of which are explainable, but sometimes when you're in your first couple of years, you don't feel it because, you're just like, well, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done, right? And then what I would do is I was in this reactionary hole where I wasn't able to get proactive enough. And so all of a sudden it was like every day was kind of frantic. Yeah. And I did that for years because it was like, oh, so-and-so needs this. Let's get on the phone. So-and-so needs that. Or I'll get that in 2 hours the other day. And then recently I just said, no meetings before 2. Nothing.
It's a really good one.
Changed everything. But I'm trying to think of something that's good. I think I am because I'm on the tail end of a development cycle. So this is like some really bad dead air. Everyone's gonna think I'm weird. I don't think I have problems. Because it's like I do this.
The thing is, I ask you. Yeah, but I ask you this one on the spot, but I also have quite a list, right? So of things that I kind of think you might be bad at because of your talks and things you've said in the past. So no worries. Nobody's going to think you're perfect through this one.
That's good. No, I would say here's the thing I'm bad at. I am bad at empathizing on small wins. I am terrible at it. I don't think I'm ever going to be good at it. I am, like, someone pointed this out the other day, and thankfully, like, someone tried to change me, and it's not that I don't recognize that small wins are good. It's just I'm the type of person where we launched one of our largest customers this week, and like, I didn't sell it. I was like, cool, what's next? Right? Like, cool, what's next? What's the next thing? And that rubs people the wrong way. But thankfully, we know this, and now one of my business partners, he's the small win guy, which sometimes causes friction between us. But yeah, I'm never going to be good at that.
Okay, cool, man. So the next one, let's. This is a good segue into our first topic, or our first pain of the day. I think one of the things that I was really interesting of hearing you talk in other talks that you've been doing is that you have this whole process, or this whole rationalized version of what happens when you freak out, right? So when a business randomly freaks out into certain issues and they overreact and way too quickly, perfectly, right? So basically, you call this a freakout cycle of executive emotion, if I got that correctly.
Yep.
And then you say that these situations lead you to a place that you call the reverberation of fuck, which I love as a concept. So can you explain a little bit of this one? Yeah, can you explain a little bit of this one to the audience?
Totally. So this was basically my own journey of lowering my anxiety and my temper even.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, I think that no matter if your company's bootstrapped or customer or venture funded, it's hard. Everything's hard, because it's maybe not difficult. Maybe it's not like you're doing rocket science, but you just have so much surface area of things you have to improve and get better at and just do in general that it's really, really hard work. And I think that what ends up happening is if something bad happens, and it doesn't matter if it's a big thing, small thing, whatever, a lot of us just assume that thing's important. And we get into these reactionary cycles where we're just like, this thing's important. Yeah. And so we drop everything. We focus on it. And when that happens, even if it's really small, because we're in this reactionary cycle, we get into like the reverberation of fuck, which is everything's bad, everything's terrible, we're going to fail, all these other things. And then that affects you. And unfortunately, that leads you to just guess and check, I would say, to solving the problem. And you don't really think through like how you should solve the problem or how you should prevent it from happening. You guess and check, and then normally you kind of fly off the handle sometimes. Or other people, they maybe won't, get upset or something like that, but they'll do it all internally, and their days will be ruined, and these types of things. Yeah. We all react to these things differently. But for me personally, I would just get, wear my heart on my sleeve, and I would never really like yell, but I would just be like, maybe way too direct, and that would cause us to solve the problem. But then that person's upset with me. Rightfully so, because maybe I was too curt, or I was rude, or I didn't handle it correctly, or I was like, why is this like this? This shouldn't be like this, which of course they know that, but that doesn't help when I say that.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that in startup world, we also tend to normalize this kind of behavior, right? It's like, hey, deal with it. You're in a startup, so we just freak out about everything. We just run around trying to fix anything, and you don't respect your planning, you don't respect your sprints. If there's a typo on the website, everybody put your computers down. We have to fix that right away.
Stop.
Everybody stop, and that's right away. But what drew me to this topic is that you have always seemed to me, and you clearly are, a very data-driven person, right? So the fact that you also go through these freakouts speaks really loud for how we're just wired, right? How you can be a very rational, data-driven person, but then you see that typo in that page that has 2 visitors a month, and you're still like, holy shit, we need to stop everything and fix this, right? So does that still happen to you? Is this something that you've been getting better at, or is it something that just shoots off of you whenever it gets its chance?
Yeah, I have gotten like I've become a whole new human, is the best way I would say it with this type of stuff. And I think that it took a lot of introspection, and I think that for a lot of folks, we don't do that work of like fixing ourselves and taking what we call, at least internally, the most charitable interpretation of what's happening, right? So what I would notice in kind of the worst of these days was, I would just make assumptions about what happened. I would, take what that person said and not even listen to them because I just like assumed what was happening. Like, and none of this was conscious. Like, I didn't wake up and was like, oh, I should be rude, or I should, like get into an argument. It was always very like, and my internal emotions were very much the reverberation of fuck, because it was, okay, if we can't figure out a typo on the website, it doesn't matter that there's 2 people who visited. If we can't figure out a number on the website, what else is wrong? What am I not seeing, right? And I think for me, that was hard being a first-time founder and going through that, because, there is the weight of the quote-unquote world is a bit on your shoulders, right? And some people they're never going to feel as intense about the business as you, and I think that that's okay, but sometimes you don't feel like it's okay, right? And in those days, you don't feel that. Now, what's really helped me is just evolving, and I can't say that it perfectly happened over the last year. I think it happened over 6 years, where I just incrementally was getting better, and I think I've really noticed in the past year, I've reached a bit of a zen with these types of things. And a good data point is our CPO and I, we are, I like to joke, like 40% of us like hate each other. Like 40% of each of us just hate each other. Don't agree with each other's political views, don't agree like with things like that. The other 60% deeply loves the other person. And when you have that type of relationship, it can be volatile sometimes. But we haven't had an argument. We've had a lot of arguments, but more discussions. We haven't had like a volatile anything for a year. And people are like amazed that that's what's happened. And really it came from this concept of the most charitable interpretation, which is when someone says something to you, you should assume that they are smart. You should assume that they may be right. And you should listen to them. Now, at the end of the conversation, you might realize, oh, they're an idiot, or, oh, like they have bad intentions, or they're wrong. But you at least listen to them and you seek to understand. It gives you like a second to not like, make your mind go in a certain place. And I think that that's actually, to me, it was a downside of being so econ, so statistics, so data focused, is that your brain goes to the nth degree. It goes to the 7th move beyond what happened, and you're already upset about it, when in reality you should sit there and be like, okay, I have to understand what happened for the first move here. I have to really understand before I go to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th move of what happened. And then the other thing I think was just, stop accepting certain things. I think we were accepting some people who were just kind of mediocre or not good at their jobs. And so we were just kind of rushing in and doing their jobs. And that caused a lot of resentment, a lot of frustration that probably wasn't fair to that person, because we underhired, or we didn't set the right expectations and those types of things. But I think that's helped when you can get the right mindset. You don't get upset. You don't yell. You don't argue. You don't do any of these things, because you're just like, oh, it's just a discussion, and this person, has good intentions, even if they might be wrong.
Well, but also as a CEO and founder, you're probably much more involved on, well, not only the marketing, but on the content side of things, you're super involved, right? So you're very involved in all the public image of the business, and you're very involved in the nitty gritty, from the newsletters to all the videos you guys put out and so on. Do you think that has made you a bit more prone to that, right? Because usually what is very common in the startup world is that CEO will try to like do everybody's jobs. And you just said that sometimes you're underhired and so on. Do you feel like that's entirely a hiring issue? So when you fix that, you are able to fully delegate freely? Or do you still feel like I could have written that blog post better, right? Or I could have done that on the website better?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because you're always going to feel like that, right? But you cannot clone yourself to like have 10 Patricks running around and fixing everything.
I'm trying. That's my side project. No, I think there's 2 things there. I think you have to think about comparative advantage, opportunity cost, right? So I probably could, in some cases write a blog post better than some of our other writers, right? But not every blog post needs to be the best, right? The way we think about some of our content, and this has evolved a lot, so it's not been like 100% true always, but there's SEO content that needs to be over a threshold.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be the best thing we've ever done, but it just needs to be over a threshold. And then there's now we have two other types of content. One is focused on spread, and that is not supposed to involve the media team as little as humanly possible. And then we have upscale content, and this is like a new thing where it's like we're taking some of our shows and really upscaling them, graphically and quality wise. So, but that's not an answer to your question. To answer your question, I think that one, realizing where to call your shot in terms of where you should jump in. So now, putting up some like clear barriers of I cannot be involved with this, or I can't jump in. And this was something that, even my business partners and I had to learn, allowed us to realize where there were holes. Oh, this person actually can't write, or this person can't do sales, right? Because we keep coming in and saving them. And that's why, and that sucks for them because they didn't realize that and they think everything's fine. And then you let them go. Yeah. Because you finally realize it, and it's terrible because it's a surprise. They think they were doing okay, and so it's realizing those things. The other aspect of this is, I think that hiring is really complicated. You are trying to, in a very short amount of time, get enough signal to let you know that you're going to find the right person, and sometimes you don't know who you're actually looking for, which is a huge waste of time for everybody. So we've had plenty of things where like, we think it's this, but we didn't put enough time into it. And then we hire someone and we're like, oh, the role's actually this, right? And so I think that, to me, if I were to do it all over again, one thing that would have helped with this, and I don't know if this would have solved all of the problems, because I think that, again, building a company is hard. There's a lot of hard things. So you have to get really good at like harnessing and using your emotions, almost like emotional jujitsu, which if you don't have reps, it doesn't work. So I don't think this would have solved it, but I think what I would have done is put a harder emphasis on just really phenomenal people, even if they weren't skilled people. Meaning, one of
attributes over skills, essentially.
Yeah, at least in the early days, because we don't know what we're doing, and we thought we did, and things changed. Because then, like those people, like the people who were really successful here, they're the ones when we changed the goalposts on them, as they say, they rose to the occasion because they were like, cool, I can just, we could put them anywhere, they would be successful. And then we got really good about specialists, like figuring out, okay, we need this specialist, let's scope it down, let's get the job description, let's get the KPIs, and then go and hire that person. But this is it's a journey.
This is a really good segue with my next pain that I had in mind, right, which was building the right team, right? Essentially, you guys have grown. I think you are around 80 people now at ProfitWell?
Yeah, about 70.
About 70 plus people. And I agree with you. I think like hiring, you can get better at it over time. But as you say, how long do you spend with somebody before doing an offer? I don't know, like 4 hours tops, or something before you have to put an offer on. It's really, really hard. And everybody, let's face it, when you go in an interview, you're in your best smile, you're in your best everything, right? So you're not your average you when you're having a shitty day, getting off the bus to go to work, right? So it's very difficult. You must have made some mistakes on the early days when it came to hiring. Is there any like particular mistakes that like dawned on you and you always comes back to you when you're hiring new people?
Yeah, we definitely, we've made some mistakes. So we've made the classic mistakes of underhiring. I think that's, unless you've done this before, I think that's a really easy mistake to
make. You've got low budget, you're in a rush.
Yeah, when I was working at the government, or I was working at Google, I mean, I wasn't really involved when I was at NSA working on hiring because I was so new. But at Google, I got involved a little bit, and you just have this giant machine that's like figured things out, and they're really just hiring, the best of the best in terms of like, a bunch of Ivy League kids that made me feel insecure because I was the only non-Ivy kid, selling ads, right? Which is not, rocket science, right? So, but when you're starting a company, it's like, it's hard to figure that out. Now, the other big mistakes we've made, I think we had a situation where we were finally trying to find leadership, and we didn't do enough time thinking about, okay, we're all leading company, but like what makes a new director of whatever really good, right? For this role, whatever the function is inside the business. And we found someone who was phenomenally skilled oriented. This person from a skills perspective was fantastic. But from a culture perspective was awful. Just absolutely terrible. And I think it's because they came from much larger companies and then coming to like a 60, 70 person company at the time.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference between there. And they were awful in very volatile ways. And then there were subtle things like politicking and stuff like that. And I think that that's when we kind of changed some of our hiring practices a lot, because we were like, well, this was, unfortunately a very large, problem. But we could at least, try to fix some of the interviews so that we can check for some of these things besides just skills or besides just the basic attributes. And I don't think we've cracked senior hiring. I think we've gotten lucky with a couple of people, and we're really good at developing people from junior to senior. We've been really good at that, which I probably would rather take that over the other. But now that we're heading into this next phase of the company, we got to get really good at hiring directors, VPs, et cetera, which, we're still flexing that muscle. And we've kind of put that on hold through COVID just because we're an in-person company, as you and I kind of joked about already.
Yeah.
And so we want to kind of make sure we do that right. Not that we couldn't hire them remotely. It's just more of a, we're fixing other problems first.
Yeah, but you mentioned also the balance between like skills and attributes, right? Or just qualities or values.
Yeah.
For upper management, that even it's more important, right? Would you feel that in a higher level manager, you would prefer somebody with the complete right values instead of focusing so much on the skill set, or would you go 50-50? What's your preference there for a higher manager?
Yeah, so let's say there's 3 levels, right? There's skills, which is like, do they know how to run an AdWords campaign, like that kind of thing. If we're a big ad, they've run a demand gen team before or something like that. There's attributes, like they're really smart, they're really conscientious, like some superpowers that they have that are transferable. And then let's say there's culture, right? So our culture, we're a big, the most charitable interpretation that I explained, that's a big thing for us. So, and we treat everyone like adults, which I know sounds very like simple, but it's actually, a lot of businesses don't treat people like adults. They infantilize them in a lot of ways. And so there's some things like, and then we have a big thing of feedback is non-negotiable, and people think like, oh yeah, I want feedback. That's great in the interview process. And then they come in and they're like, it's a hose of feedback. And the way you receive feedback is very negotiable, but and it's not all negative. It's just a lot of feedback. Oh, this doesn't look right, or that doesn't, or hey, what do you think about that? Like just lots of that, and they're not used to it. So we got those three levers. I think that I think for upper level management, I would probably skate a little bit more towards attributes as well as values, like culture. Because if you think about a CMO, like he or she should not be running the same playbook that he or she ran at the last company. Unless it's a picture perfect match, which sometimes it is, he or she should be evaluating it. That's more of an attribute thing. Can he or she think through the problem and then based on that come up with some good solutions of what we should leverage and what we shouldn't? But I do think that the skills are super, super important, because if we're running a content team and you've never done content before, you're very demand gen focused, you probably shouldn't work here, right? And it's not that demand gen's bad, it's just we don't do as much of it. Like it's not as much of a focus. And maybe it will be in the future, but that's why I think you can't have, I don't think you can over-index on, one of those categories and not the others, because, this is what's troubling about hiring an exec is it's really, really hard to find good people. And this is why I think a lot of people, they hire the first few people that they see, which is definitely a mistake we've made, rather than, focusing on, waiting and being okay to wait to find that right person.
You said earlier as well that you guys are really good at like people growing people internally, right? And I think that's really interesting. But when you have a small company, it's also pretty quick to hit the roof. right? So you have you start in as a junior marketer or whatever. You go minier. All of a sudden, you're the head of marketing of a 4-people team, 3-people team, and that's your roof right there, right? So do you guys also have this culture of like the only way forward not being a manager, and also having like a good separation between individual contributors and people managers, as in there will be people that need to have a continuous growth path even though we don't see them as people managers ever, but the people tend to think that being a manager it's like the only way up, right? Do you guys have a path that's separated for specialists and individual contributors to feel like they keep growing?
We fight this so much, this mindset.
Well, it's the standard, right? Like you feel like if I want to make X money, I have to be a CMO.
There's so many people who they start. I got a funny story. I'm not going to say his name because I think he'll be embarrassed a little bit. But probably the luckiest thing that ever happened to us at this company is this individual came in as a marketing intern, and didn't know how to write well at all or anything like that, but just was like really gritty, like very high on those attributes. And I think when you're junior, like it's really the attributes because you don't have any skills, right? And he's now one of our principal engineers. And we put a lot of time and a lot of like learning, and we taught him how to code like our CPO did and a bunch of other things. And so there was a lot of effort put in there, but he also like learned a lot on his own. But what's interesting is he was like, oh, I want to be a manager. I want to try to manage. And we're like, no, you don't. Like, no, you don't.
Yeah, it's a different game, right?
You know, and then, we hired a couple interns that reported to him. And, interns I think are really good for first-time managers because interns are heavy management. Everyone thinks, oh yeah, it'll just be easy, cheap work. No, it's not. And we pay our interns, market rates anyways. But he came out of that and was like, I don't want to manage for a while. I got to work on other stuff. So I think, long story short, we kind of fight against that. But yes, every role at the company has a management path and then an individual contributor path.
Yeah.
And they are, equal kind of pay. And, the skill set for a really rock star, engineer, I hate to use that phrase, I shouldn't have said that, but the engineer for a really, really good engineer is not the same skill set for a really, really good manager and vice versa. And so I think that's a big mistake a lot that we haven't made and a lot of companies make is they're just like, oh, you're really good at your job. You should be really good at managing. And it's just never the case. And
the intern bonanza, has that also been a mistake you've made in the past? Like I've also been in high growth companies when they just got massive investment or so. And the quick thing is to just grow the team quicker, get more hands on deck, and then you end up with having like 30% of your team is just interns. And as you say, it feels like they're going to help you. Very often, they are more work than they are help because, of course, they're learning. That's what they're there for. And we've all been there at some point.
Yeah.
Have you guys like gone like, hey, let's just get 10 people in for the salary of one, intern them out, and see how that works, or you haven't fell in that trap?
I made this mistake in the first 3 months of the company, and we have not made the mistake since. So it was just me for the first 3 months of the company. It was just me and 7 interns.
Yeah, there you go. That's the one I'm talking about.
It was really bad. Yeah, it was really bad. Now,
it's what you had, right? It's what you had as well.
It was what we had, and but it did not net out. Like, it was not great. But I also was nervous to hire anyone like full time because we didn't raise any money. It was just me in a room, and I cashed it in my 401k, and that was it. And it wasn't that much money. It was literally enough for me to live on ramen, for 6 months. So I think that was the big thing. But I will say that since then we've gotten to a point where we look for outstanding interns that we would hire, right?
Yeah.
And we would, either try to. We've had a couple who have quit school. We don't try to convince them. We are very like, we're not going to try to like argue with you. There is an opportunity. Here's the opportunity. We are more than happy to talk about it, but we don't want to convince you to quit school. And we've had some who have been interns multiple times, and then we end up hiring. So yeah, that's kind of what we try to look for. Right now, we kind of shut down the intern program just because we're adjusting to remote ourselves because we were not a remote company. and we didn't want to add the extra level of complexity of onboarding an intern. So yeah.
But if I get this correctly, you guys have a team in Argentina, right?
Yeah.
How many people are there in Argentina right now?
So.
And it's mostly
Rosario,
engineers, right?
Yeah, it's mostly engineers. I think it's about 15 right now, if I'm remembering correctly. We're probably going to get to around 20, 25 by the end of the year, depending on, because we still, it's interesting because we're, between you and me, we are, and anyone listening.
Nobody's going to listen to this.
Yeah, that's right. We're trying to figure out, like scaling and office space and all this stuff has like thrown all that stuff into a loop. But yeah, we have a team in Argentina.
How was that? How did that come to be? Because, well, I'm from Chile, so I'm just next door to those guys.
Oh, cool.
And how did that come to be? Because it's an odd location, right? Like I would have said, if you go to Argentina, you go to Buenos Aires or whatever, but you went to Rosario.
Yeah.
So how did that come to be? Was it like a first hire that you said, this guy's fantastic, let him grow his team over there? Or how did that come to be?
More or less, yeah. I mean, the real impetus was we're in Boston, and HubSpot's paying entry-level, no experience developers like $125 a year.
Yeah.
And we lost someone we were really excited about, and it was one of those things where like, there's like, yes, we can get them on the dream, but like a kid out of school, and we typically don't hire like entry-level engineers, but we hire more senior. Because we're willing to pay more for senior, but we don't want to pay more for entry level, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
What we ended up doing was Facundo, my business partner, he ended up knowing this guy. That's where he's from. He's from Rosario. He's been in the States for two decades. But he was like, oh, I know this guy, friend of a friend. He's kind of like he's pretty senior, like really talented. Like, why don't we just try this, right? Like, why don't we just try it? And I was like, okay. And then it started with, okay, well, he's hired 2 people. So we had 3 folks down there. They were using extra space in his wife's office. And then all of a sudden we got hooked up with, so that's where the technical university is in Argentina.
So you got a lot of the talent.
Basically, well, all of a sudden, like, again, it's like they don't want to work for one. There's not a lot of like tech companies there to work for, even though the tech university's there. There's some big companies, but it's like they treat them like an offshore shop basically, rather than treating them as like, well, I shouldn't say that, but like they weren't treated as like fully fledged team members, or at least that was my impression. It's probably not the truth. But so all of a sudden, one of the professors there was like, do you want to pay me a little bit and I'll just refer you a bunch of people? And we're like, sure. And so all of a sudden we just have this like constant, flow of interviews, which is really great. And we were on a path of just hiring like 1 to 2 a month for a while now. So it's been a good time so far.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So one of the other things that I think you're like, this is easy to guess, right? You're everywhere. So when I put on LinkedIn, you're there. When I look at YouTube, you're there. You're in my inbox like every 2 minutes. So you are very busy. I know some of this stuff is automated.
Not every 2 minutes.
I'm not that stupid. I know some of this stuff is automated, but you're really, really busy, dude. And you've been vocal about putting, for parts of your life, I don't know if that's still the case, like your personal life pretty much on the background and dedicating yourself fully to being a founder and to being in ProfitWell. Looking back a little bit on the last years, is there any regrets there? Is this a decision that you feel you're happy with, or is it a decision that you feel like, holy shit, I should have done something different?
Yeah, well, I want to qualify what you said, because it's not that it's wrong. It's just more like I'm a big believer that there is no... I don't think work-life balance is real. Mm-hmm. Like, I understand why we talk about it, and I understand, like, for some folks... 100% like work-life balance is super important, like especially if you're in a blue-collar job and there's a lot of not problems, but there's a lot of other factors, like, and so I want to be super clear. I'm talking about like us working in tech. We're very blessed that we can work in tech. We're very blessed we can kind of work from anywhere. We're very blessed in the type of work we get to do using our minds versus digging ditches all day, right? So that's a first qualifier, because like, every time I talk about this, someone's like, yeah, but what about the person working in a factory? I'm like, we're not talking about them right now. Like, and so the other qualifier there is like, I really believe that I don't think that's the best way to be successful. We put so much of our hearts, minds, and souls into companies, whether we're, a junior engineer or the founder of the company, that I think they blend. And I think you need to figure out how you best work.
Yeah.
Some people, they have weeks where they're just, 15-hour days, but they're by choice, not because some deadline. And then the next week they need to like take most of it off, right? And I think that should be okay, because that's the best way they work. They like to get on these sprints. And for me, what it really took realizing, and this is kind of my personal thing, is my job is my identity. It's like the number one thing in my identity. It didn't matter when I was working at Google. It didn't matter when I was working here, working for the government. It's part of the reason I didn't want to work for the government anymore, was because I like talking about my job, and when we're working in U.S. intelligence, you can't talk about your job. But yeah, it's my identity. And so if it's my identity, why should I, at least personally, and anyone who's like me, have to apologize for my work being a major part of my life, and sometimes parts of my personal life, or sometimes the things that you or someone else may think, oh, these are things that should be important to you. Why should I apologize for, deprioritizing some of those things, right? So I don't think, like, when I talk about this, like, I have a partner, Jenny. She is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. We've been together now 5 years, but she gets it, and she gets that, like, between these hours on Monday through Friday,
you're gone.
Like, I'm gone, but on the weekends it's all her, right? that kind of thing. And
do you manage to commit to that, or are you on the weekend still like running algorithms and going mad scientist?
Well, it depends. No, it depends on the week, right? So on the weekend, like, if she's been working on this big project, so she's been away on the weekends and stuff. So yeah, I'll do some work, but I also then know that I need some time off. So I'll read a lot, or I'll do something, right? And that's how I recharge. And it'll be, it might be tangentially related to the business, but I think that we would do much better in the world if we stopped judging others for how they work, or judging others for the choices that they've made. Now, there are plenty of people who, they like, and I think the dissonance is where we get in trouble. So there's I call them $30,000 millionaires, who are the, people, influencers, oh, I'm crushing it, everything's amazing.
Yeah.
And they're only working 15 hours a week, and they're like, why am I not a millionaire? And it's like, there's very few companies that, have been able to get to that level. And it's okay to, I talk about this with a lot of team members. I'm like, listen, there's multiple paths, right? So the white picket fence, that whole path, working 40 hours a week, you can work here. That's totally fine at ProfitWell. That's absolutely okay.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
And you shouldn't be apologetic about it. Now, there are going to be people who are, the people who are, either with their mind or with their time, like grinding. And yeah, those people might be rewarded in different ways. Maybe they work on, more interesting projects, and it's not like kind of a standard role, for lack of a better phrase. But those are the trade-offs, and you should be okay with that. Now, if you only want to work 35 hours a week, you want the white picket fence, you want to, have events you go to every single night, I don't know if you're going to be a VP. Like, I just don't know, but that should be okay.
Exactly.
Like, it's really hard to have it all. And I think that people are like, feel like they're entitled to have it all. And I just don't think that's the right way to think about it.
I was going to ask you, like, how does that leak into your team, right? Because, like, I think we were talking about earlier about the facts of, like, businesses doing better when their founders are fully all in and have, like, no hobbies, no nothing. But how does this leak in the team? Like, do you deal well with the fact that you were just mentioning, right? That not everybody is going to be as invested and as all in as you are as a founder.
Yeah, it's never going to happen. Like, it's never going to happen.
Are you realistic about that, or do you?
A founder should be the person. Yeah. So I think that, just a couple of comments. Like, a founder, like, it took me a little while to realize this, but it didn't take that long. I'm never going to, like, no one is ever going to be more invested in this company than I am. And this is part of the reason I'm a founder, because when I was working at other companies, and I was, again, a young punk kid who his job was his identity for a lot of reasons, I always cared more than my boss, or at least I felt like I did, right? And it might not have been true, but that's how I always felt. And so now I'm like, running the company, and there are certainly people who care just as much as me, and Facundo and Peter, I would argue, and maybe some other people at the company if we really thought about it. But I can't expect that, the kid out of school who has no idea what he or she wants to do, and, wants to, like, they're X, Y, or Z is super important in their life, their religion, their volunteering, all these other things. I can't expect them to be at the same level.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And so what we've done is I always, anyone who reports to me, you know, I always have a conversation with them and I'm like, hey, you're going to receive emails from me at, you know, I wake up every day at 4 a.m. You're going to receive emails from me at 4:30. I don't expect you to answer right away. Like, I don't expect, and now it's, you know, we hire the right type of people. I think that everyone's very, like, strongly, you know, willed in certain ways. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And, like, I don't even need to tell them this, right?
Yeah, but hold on.
There are some folks who are more.
But you wake up at 4 a.m.? Shit, man. Like, what? Please don't tell me you go running 5K before you do statistics work, because I'm gonna feel like shit about myself. What do you do at 4 a.m.?
No. So here's the thing I discovered, just as a little tangent. I think you get to discover, like, your schedule. What schedule makes you the happiest or the most fulfilled, I would argue. And I think you as an individual control your happiness. I think myself as a boss, I always say this to the team, like, hey, we're here to make you fulfilled. We're here to give you really hard things that you want to work on and are really excited to work on. And you will control your happiness. And if you're unhappy about something, like, talk about it. Like, let's figure it out so that we can help you, set you up, those types of things. Now, 4 a.m., I discovered the time of day and the work schedule I have that makes me happiest. Mm-hmm. I really, really like when I have a few hours either before the workday or a few hours at the workday, or both sometimes, where I am kind of uninterrupted, no one's around.
Yeah, I get that one.
It feels like I started my day, and it feels like things are good.
Yeah.
Right. If I come in at 9 and everything's kind of going, and I already got 17 Slacks and all these other things, I feel like I can't plan my day because I feel like I have to react, right? And this goes back to, you know, the reactive kind of cycle that I was trying to break out of. But I also, normally what I do is, you know, I get up, shower, all that kind of fun stuff. And then, you know, on certain days, like Saturday and Sunday, I do this Saturday and Sunday as well. I'll read, I'll kind of get some stuff done. Maybe I'll go to the gym once it opens at around 5:30, that type of stuff. But during the week, I normally go right to the office and I work. And then normally, depending on what type of day it is, and I have certain types of days, normally by like 1 p.m., I'll go to the gym, and that kind of resets the rest of my day. And then the afternoon is a lot of meetings and stuff like that, which I'm kind of like calibrated for. So yeah, and then I go home, I chill for a few hours, depending on what the night is, and I typically go to bed around 8 or 9, depending on the day. All
right. You've also come across and have gone through some pretty heavy health issues as well. You're a cancer survivor, if I don't get this wrong, 3 times, was it?
Twice.
Twice.
I mean, technically, if you ask the true oncologist, it's probably once, because the way they measure this is 5 years remission, and basically I got cancer, you know, at 4 years and 9 months. Different type, but you know, I don't know. That's for them to decide. It's all semantic. But yeah, two times, and everything's good now. I'm officially in remission, which is good, and everything's great.
But also at one point you mentioned this happened at a pretty like pivotal point for ProfitWell, right? You were like 2 years in the business, like horrific timing, right? That would have been a time for me, dude, where I would have been like, fuck this, I'm just gonna go and enjoy my life, and I guess this is not for me, I'll just next one, right? You would have outlived it, and then you would have regretted it probably, but didn't that cross your mind? Didn't just like, what the hell am I doing about this pricing thing? Fuck it, I'm gonna go live somewhere and in the beach and just enjoy life.
Yeah. Well, again, my work's my identity, right? So it's a little hard, but I think, no, it's a good question. So it's the first time I got cancer, I was at Google, which if you're ever going to get sick, best place to get sick. Amazing.
Good place.
I never saw a bill. It's not that I didn't have to pay for anything. I never saw a bill, which was kind of insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. Also, for a little bit of context, like I am from South America, you're from North America. For the Europeans listening, which is the majority of this podcast, that doesn't make any sense. But yes,
I know
it's a very big thing to appreciate.
Yeah. I'm sure they've seen the healthcare debate at some point with the U.S. in the past, 5-10 years. But anyways, so it was amazing. My manager was like, "Hey," like I had a manager I didn't appreciate best manager I ever had, but I didn't realize it until I started managing people. But basically, he was like, hey, you can just go. Like, you can just, like, leave for as long as this takes. We'll pay you at 100%, all that kind of stuff. Don't worry about your commissions, all that stuff. We'll take care of you. And I was like, no. Like, no, like, no. And then this is, honestly, it's from a place of this originally, and now I've learned to, like, harness this emotion better. It was from a place of, like, probably self-hate, insecurity, etc. Like, no, this isn't going to beat me. This isn't going to take me. Go fuck yourself. Like, this type of thing. Like, I had my best quarter ever that quarter while I was like going through treatment and surgery. And the first time around, it was like 2 rounds of chemo, or 2 like 6 to 8 week rounds of chemo plus surgery, all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty bad. Like, and it was a lot, and I was definitely pushing it. And I think that here's what I realized during that time, and this is maybe helpful, and it might be wisdom. So you might have to experience. Hopefully, you don't have to experience something as crazy, but you might have to experience to really get it, is you learn that death is inevitable and that you're not a superhero. And I know that that's so obvious, but when you're young, let's say under 40, yes, there are little things that creep up in the 30s and stuff like that. But when you're young, you don't feel like you can fly, but you feel like, I'm fine. I got 30 years.
Not to
40
me,
years,
right? This shit's happened to other people.
Yeah, I got time, but I also got time, right? Like, I got time, right? And what this did is it was a good slap in the face of, like, maybe you don't have time, right? And I was very thankful, or I was very blessed that, you know, it was early stage and really good prognosis and all that kind of stuff. But it was one of those things where I don't fear death anymore. And I know it's a really weird concept. Like, and I'm sure that if I was, you know, hanging off of, you know, a building or something like that, you know, I would probably fear death. But I mean, like, I don't fear death as a concept. But I also realize that this is going to end, and if this is going to end, I want to, like, go out in the right way. And that's why, like, I was like, I'm going to go work for myself. Like, if I'm going to bust my ass and I'm going to care more, or at least perceive to care more, I want to make it so that success or failure is on me. And that's a very naive way to think, but it evolved over time, so that the second time I had it, thankfully, it was, again, very early, and they wouldn't have detected it for another 6 months, they estimated, if I wasn't getting regular checks. And then I just had to go through radiation, which is bad, but not as bad, because it's kind of, I mean, this is going to be too simple, but it's kind of like an X-ray machine pointed at you for, you know, 45 minutes to an hour. But like 5-6 times a week. So long story short, I think that when this happened with the company, I had the benefit of, like, no, this is what I should be doing. This is what I should be doing. I want to push this forward. I'm going to go to my treatment, going to make sure I go to the office and do my thing. And also, you know, be a strong face for the team, because people just naturally worry about people that they even remotely care about with this type of stuff. So yeah, long story short, it was one of those things where it was more like, I got to go. And I gotta, you know, if this is the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be proud of the last thing I do, because I'm doing the thing that I like, and I love. And
what's interesting is that I also got this from one of your talks as well, when I thought it was really insightful, is that as we've gone through the talk, like you mentioned a few times, like, it's okay as long as you're being honest to what you want to do, right? And very often what you hear is that people say, well, I want to be the next Jeff Bezos or whatever the hell it is. And that has some sort of action that is required to get there. And if you're not willing to put it in, then you're not going to get there. And it's totally okay to not want to get there, but to be consistent with yourself and say, hey, I actually just want to be, you know, the marketing manager of a nice company and live my life there and be happy. And that's all I want. And your actions would be consistent with that, right? So just about, like, finding what you really want. And most people don't really act as where they say they want to get to, right? Most people say they want. I want to get to A, but I definitely don't act like I want to get to A, right? So, and this, like, time clock ticking gave you kind of, like, put you on your feet and got you there. And you also mentioned how you created these documents in the company called If I Die Docs, right? Which I guess, do you still do those at the company today?
We don't call them that anymore.
That's a good one.
No, If I Die Docs are basically, I mean, that really helped the operational piece of the business. Now, it came from, like, a very macabre, like, perspective, but it actually is, it's a good thing that all companies end up doing. It basically is like, what we tell people is, hey, make sure that you're documenting what you're doing.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have, like, we sometimes call it a command center, or, hey, like a document that if you got hit by a bus, God forbid, like, people would be able to like pick up on, what's going on. And within a short amount of time, take over, whatever you were doing. And it's just like, as you grow, like, I think that becomes just so much more important, and you don't really think about like, people either love documentation and appreciate it, or they like begrudgingly do it, but you don't realize how important it is until you start growing. Because all of a sudden you're like, why didn't so-and-so do this thing? Oh, they didn't know. Why didn't they know? Well, that didn't get passed down in the oral history of training, what we normally do.
Yeah. It is one of those things, though, that starts really like everybody's on it, and you're like, hey, let's document everything. And it kind of wears out over time, and then a few people join, and you kind of lose that kind of like tempo. Did you manage to like keep that up? Is it still a priority that ProfitWell can be consistent about documenting what people do, easier to onboard new people and so on? Or is that something that fluctuates?
No, we have a good culture of writing, I would say.
Yeah.
So we kind of do the Amazon style of like, any big initiatives should have a memo. And if we're going to talk about the initiative, we all read the memo first and then talk about it, kind of a thing. Because writing has the ability to kind of crystallize your thinking. And then there will be people who will be like, well, I don't know this. And you try to explain it to them. Like they'll ask you some question, and you try to explain it to them, and they just don't get it. And sometimes what you'll do is you'll say, okay, why don't you write what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Give me the template of what you're looking for, because then it helps. I think sometimes people ask those questions, they don't listen to you because they have this vision of exactly what they want. And so sometimes putting it on them is super helpful. I think for us, it's anytime there's a lot of questions or something going on, myself, Acuna, or Peter will start writing memos. And then we have other people who write memos, or who are working on figuring that out for other things, because we want this central repo, and we use Notion for all of this, which makes it super useful.
All right. The one we wanted to address also, like one of your business pains from ProfitWell, right? And one of those that you mentioned was that you're trying to grow 4 products essentially at the same time. You guys have 4 products. Well, one of them is free, which is your metrics product. And then you have your retain product, your recognize for revenue recognition product, and your price intelligently product. And when I had Rand on the show, Rand Fishkin, on the first episode, he mentioned as one of his like most biggest regrets, like trying to divest from the SEO product too early. Right, so he has this really strong SEO product, and then he's like, hey, we need to acquire follower wonk, acquire this or the other, do a bunch of other side projects that he would think would complement the SEO product. And at the end, it was for their detriment, right? They started losing focus, they started not shipping as quickly as they were doing. I can imagine that given all the data that you have, right, from the subscription market, this temptation is really hard to resist. Because you go around your data and you're like, shit, this could be a new product. Shit, only me have this. I should launch this today because nobody else has it. So today, not next year. Are you not scared a little bit on going on the route that you divest your attention too much and then you start like growing everything, nothing instead of everything? Or have you taken measures and you're very aware of this?
So we're very aware of it, because if you think about it,
first step,
it affects a lot of things.
Yeah.
So just imagine us doing a redesign of our website. What does our homepage look like? Like, I don't even know, right? Like, how do we describe ourselves, right? In sales conversations, right? So we're very aware of it. So here's the reason. We discovered very early on that we serve subscription companies. And we discovered the subscription market from a logo perspective, like meaning the number of companies out there, it's not actually that large. It's about 100, 150,000 on the high end.
Yeah.
And that's if you include SaaS, subscription e-commerce, subscription media, subscription nonprofit, all across the board. And so when you have a market, and then half of those aren't good leads, right? Like they're just going to be bad for a whole host of reasons. And then maybe the other half you're going to have to pare down. And so we have tens of thousands of potential customers, right? So when you have that situation, the path to $1 billion, and we want to be $1 billion+ company in terms of revenue, is not just valuation, is multi-product. So multi-product, it's high LTV, which means multi-product likely, or higher price points for the products that you sell, right? So with that vision, we knew, and we started looking at multi-product, and we were like, well, most people don't do this to 100 million. They don't do it until they're 100 million, because it's hard enough doing one, and the market's big enough and all these other things, and then they'll come out with the other one when they'll spend like 10 million to produce that next product, right? Well, we know that getting to 100 million is actually going to be quite difficult if we only focus on one. But we also know that if we focus on more than one, it gets super complicated, right? So this is a rather unconventional thing. And the problem with unconventional things is that convention turns out to be right more often than not.
Yep.
That we've tried to focus on, which is, all right, no one's cracked at to figure out how to do this in a scalable way. A lot of times they just establish a GM for something, and then they do another thing, and then they do another thing, and it just gets really complicated. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of bake this into our DNA early, and we're going to struggle. It's going to take a little bit while longer to develop some of these products. It's going to take a little bit while longer to develop the marketing for these products. But we know we need to do this in order to get to that longer term vision that we're going after. So we're willing to take kind of the hit. Now, how do we kind of prevent some problems that like Rand talked about? I think for us, we look at the critical like first principle of things, which is, okay, we can't focus on everything. Not everything's going to be a priority. So some of these products, we are going to be so comically narrow with who we target.
Yeah.
And we're going to be so comically narrow with how we target them. We only talk to them if they come inbound for one or two of our products. No, it's really one of our products. We're only going to talk to them inbound, and we're not going to necessarily take on anyone who has these characteristics, even if they come to us, right? So that's kind of how you like prioritize certain things. And we'll get to it, but only when this is starting to go. Then we'll figure out what is the trigger for each new product, or once the other product gets here, we're going to have this like SEAL team from the engineering side start working on that one, right? And from a go-to-market side, it really comes down to making sure that we have the right go-to-market teams figured out for certain products before we move on to opening up a go-to-market team for the next product.
Yeah.
But it also means that we're not going to just create 4 companies underneath one company where they just share HR or something like that. It's going to be something that we're going to have to, figure out some more novel ways to kind of target this.
Well, it's interesting because you've also experienced some of these pains, right? Like initially, and I don't know if I got this right, because to be honest, I briefly met you in 2016 when you were here in Amsterdam doing some work with the guys from the TNW, and I was doing a project there. And at the time, you were coming in some sort of as a consultant from Price Intelligently, right? So for me, you were Patrick from Price Intelligently for like 5 years. And I would always say like Patrick for Price Intelligently, Patrick for Price Intelligently. And you guys did some rebranding on which you called yourself ProfitWell, which used to be your product, if I got this correctly. And then Price Intelligently became one of the ProfitWell products, which is your pricing optimization product, right? To get that difference, to me, which is a guy that has you in my inbox like often, right? I just realized this before the interview. Right, so I was like, so what the hell is going on with Patrick and Price Intelligently? I was like, okay, ProfitWell, and then ProfitWell is nested here, blah blah blah. So as you were saying, right, like if you go to through your page right now, and you go in like with a white canvas, the more offering you have, the more confusing it is for the consumer. The more you get like, wow, so should I get this? Should I get the other? Do you feel like you are combating that right now, or do you still get a lot of people coming to you and be like, oh, yeah, I got it differently? Because of the changes that have been happening in the last years.
So 2 axes there.
Yeah.
One, coming to us because of the change over the years. That's one that we handled a lot initially, and now it's like tapering more and more.
Right.
And we're probably going to handle that for another 5 years. Right. I think the one we worry about more, because that just happens with name changes, and the best advice I got with name changes is like, just don't do it.
Yep.
But we had to do it. And so a lot of the advice was like, it's not going to be a single email. It's going to be like thousands of conversations with people. Yeah. Oh, I thought this was profit. Oh, no. Here's the difference, and just like arming people, like be able to explain it. The one we're more concerned about is the classic, they come to the website and they're like, what do they do?
Yeah.
And what we've kind of realized, and this is not, I'm not saying this isn't a problem. It's definitely a problem, and we're going to keep iterating on solving it. But what we're okay with underneath this problem are the people who come to us for a specific thing through word of mouth or content, and then don't realize we have other stuff.
Right.
And I think there's a thread there that we're pulling on that I think is actually okay for multi-product companies, which is, hey, they come to us for metrics because someone recommended, oh, you should use ProfitWell. They come to us for retain, oh, you should use retain. And with that, they get on one of the products, or they get they get on something, and then we have different loops that will remind them or show them other things. Or there's stuff in the app, they're like, oh, I didn't know they had this, that's really cool. Or they're on the phone with the salesperson who can then kind of explain everything, right? And so we're kind of okay with that, but this is also why, for multiple reasons, we have a heavy content marketing engine. Because if we just have outbound sales, then it gets a little bit tougher, right? We still have outbound sales, but it's one of those things where I'm all about bringing you into the sphere of ProfitWell, right? Through content, through a product, etc. And then that buys me time to show you everything else. And maybe I don't want to show you everything else because you're just not a good target fit for it.
Yeah.
You're not an accounting person or a finance person. I don't want to show you Recognize.
Yeah.
Those types of things. So it's something we're still pulling on. We have not solved it yet, but it's something we're well aware of.
Yeah, it's difficult, man. And I think even when you have more savvy SaaS people or whatever, the way we go through pages and the way we read today, it's just really quickly scanning them. And if it doesn't make sense, you just kind of give up, right? And your products are, to an extent, already complicated products. Like you have to put a little bit of thought into understanding what they are. But okay, man,
My goal is...
Yeah, go ahead.
My goal is basically that no one goes to the homepage. And I mean that sincerely.
Yeah, you want them to go straight to each product, right? Yeah.
But no, yeah, and that's kind of how we think about it, at least for initially, is like we're always going to have people go to our homepage, we're going to iterate on how to do that. And Atlassian, I think, does actually a fairly decent job. It's like a really obvious job, but it's a good job. But the goal is that we get so good that people go to the page immediately from wherever they are without needing to go to the homepage.
Yeah, okay, man. We're running a little bit out of time, and you have other stuff to do later on your day. My day is ending, but you're still going. We wrap it up with a little bit of tips. So if you have some resources that you would like to share, they can be your own as well. We've recommended some of yours in the past as well. Books, podcasts, whatever there is. Is there anything you would like to share with the audience?
I'll do one shameless plug and then one not so shameless, one that's not ProfitWell. So the one book I'd recommend reading, High Output Management by Andy Grove. I think once you start scaling beyond just like the initial couple of people, it's a really, really good book on learning how to work with teams, how to think about workflow, all that kind of stuff. I read it about twice a year. And then the shameless, kind of plug. We have a lot of content at ProfitWell.
Yep.
So feel free to check that out. A couple of highlights. We wrote a book on pricing. We wrote a book on churn reduction. And then we also publish a subscription index, which is basically you can get a B2B version or a consumer version where you can actually look at on a daily basis or a weekly, if you subscribe weekly, how the market's moving. And we publish that data pretty consistently. And also I'm Patrick at ProfitWell.com. If you have any questions on anything, more than happy to follow up. May take me a second to get back to you, but I get back to everyone eventually.
Yeah, I'll share a couple. I think the Objectivity Trap is a new report published by Rory Sutherland from �𝐿𝐷. He published it just last week, and it's really good for those people that see the world as more than data, which is me. So it's really interesting to get a little bit of an idea of how our minds work way beyond data, and it really shines some hope into the people that are a bit less data intense like myself. And the other one is Factfulness. I think is not a business book per se, but I think that if you struggle like wrapping your head around data and putting it into context, it's from Hans Rosling. He's a Swedish doctor that passed away in 2016. It's a really good one to show all the biases we have around data. I think in so many businesses, true mathematicians are not there, and we're just stuck with shed mathematicians, including myself. and we make such bullshit claims constantly with our biases, right? And we just assume they're correct because we put a number in front of them. Completely taken out of context, completely biased. So if you struggle with that, or you have some shit mathematicians in your company that you want to call bullshit on, that's a good one to read about our biases. All right, man. Thank you so much for having me. I had to chase you around a little bit, but I'm happy that you were here. I'm a big fan of your work, and all the best for you moving forward.
Awesome, brother. Be well.
Have a good one. Ciao, ciao.
Growth Pains.